My parents let our jobless cousin stay with us, and he started bullying my sister. When I stood up for her, my parents chose him over us. I'm at a crossroads right now, and I don't know if I'm being unreasonable or if my family is just completely out of line. It feels like my whole world is turning upside down, and I'm hoping that by posting here, I can get some perspective. So here's my story. I'm 26, M, and I have a younger sister named Lily, who's 20, F. We were raised in a fairly close-knit family. We've had our issues over the years, like every family does, but we've always stuck together, or at least I thought we did. A few months ago, things took a turn that I never expected, and now everything feels like it's falling apart. A little background first. Our cousin, Ben, 27, has always been, well, not exactly the most responsible person in the family. He's the type of guy who never really settled into a steady job or career. Over the years, he's had a string of short-term, low-paying jobs, and every time he hits a bump, he comes crawling back to family for help. This time, it was different, though. Ben had recently lost another job. Shockingly, this was his third in the past year. And instead of trying to get his life together, he ended up asking my parents if he could move in with us temporarily until he figured things out. My parents, being the kind and generous people they are, didn't hesitate to say yes. I, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled. I've never had a great relationship with Ben. He's always been a bit of a mooch and tends to take advantage of the generosity of others. But my parents made it clear they were helping him out of the goodness of their hearts, and I didn't want to make things awkward. So I kept my mouth shut, figuring it would be for a few weeks, maybe a month at most. When Ben moved in, things seemed okay at first. He promised to help around the house, look for a job, and not cause any issues. He was polite at the beginning, not wanting to rock the boat. But I started noticing things after a week or so. He wasn't making any real effort to find work, and I could see him spending most of his time either playing video games or watching TV. He'd occasionally walk around the house, but there was always an air of laziness about him. He'd ask my parents for money here and there, claiming he needed it for food or transportation, but I could see that he wasn't really trying to pull his weight. Now, this wouldn't have been such a big deal if it wasn't for the fact that Lily and I were both working hard. I have a full-time job in marketing, and Lily is balancing part-time work while going to college. We both do our best to help around the house, whether it's with chores or contributing to the bills. So seeing Ben do absolutely nothing day after day, while my parents treated him like a guest of honor, started to get under my skin. But the real issue started when Ben started targeting Lily. At first it was small, little digs here and there. He'd make comments about her clothes, or if she was running late for work, he'd mock her in front of all of us, saying something like, "You're never on time. How do you even have a job?" It was the kind of thing that made me uncomfortable, but I figured maybe he was just being immature. Lily is sensitive, and I didn't want to cause any more drama, so I didn't immediately confront him. But as the weeks went on, it became clear that Ben was deliberately trying to make Lily feel bad about herself. One evening, I was in the living room working on my laptop when I overheard Ben making a comment to Lily about her weight. She had been complaining to me about how she'd put on a few pounds due to the stress of her part-time job and schoolwork, and Ben, overhearing the conversation, decided to make a cruel remark. He said, "Maybe if you didn't sit around all day eating junk food, you wouldn't be so fat. Do you even work out? You're never going to get a boyfriend with that body." I immediately snapped. I marched over to him and told him to get his act together. I told him that bullying my sister, especially about something as sensitive as her body image, was completely unacceptable. Ben, of course, laughed it off, calling me overprotective and sensitive. He said, "It's just a joke. She's so uptight. What's the big deal?" But for Lily, it wasn't a joke. I could see her visibly shrinking, her face turning red from embarrassment, and I knew this was not the first time he'd made comments like this. I told him he needed to apologize to Lily, or I would tell my parents. Ben, not wanting to get into a confrontation, begrudgingly apologized in the most half-hearted way possible, saying something like, "Yeah, whatever. Sorry, I guess." Lily didn't say anything in the moment, but I could tell she was hurt. She excused herself and went to her room. I went to check on her afterward, and she admitted that Ben had been making similar comments for a while now, but she didn't want to cause trouble. She said she didn't feel like she had anywhere to go since he was living with us, and she didn't want to upset my parents. A few days after the incident, Ben made another remark, this time about Lily's academic success. She had just finished a big presentation for one of her college courses, and Ben overheard her talking about it. He said, "What's the point of your degree? You're not going to make any real money. You might as well just marry rich, because no one cares about whatever crap you're studying." That was the last straw for me. I lost my temper. I walked into the living room where Ben was sitting, and I told him to stop bullying my sister. I told him that if he couldn't respect her and treat her like a human being, then he had no place in our home. Ben looked at me, shocked, and said, "Are you serious? She's just a little kid. She can't take a joke, and you're acting like I'm the bad guy." I told him that it wasn't about jokes. It was about respect. I told him he had no right to talk to her that way, and I wasn't going to stand by and watch him tear her down. At that point, my parents overheard the argument and rushed in. My dad, who had been in the kitchen, immediately sided with Ben, saying, "Ben didn't mean any harm. You need to relax. You're overreacting." My mom, who had been silent up until then, agreed, saying that I shouldn't be so hard on Ben. "He's going through a rough time, and you're being too harsh. You need to cut him some slack." I was furious. I said, "It's not about cutting him slack. It's about standing up for my sister. This isn't normal. Ben has been bullying her for weeks, and you're just letting it slide." But my parents, instead of backing me up or even acknowledging how bad Ben's behavior was, chose to side with him. My mom said, "Ben is family, and we have to be there for him. If you keep this up, you'll drive him away. And then what will we do?" That was when I realized what was happening. My parents were so invested in keeping the peace with Ben that they were willing to turn a blind eye to his behavior, even if it meant hurting their own children. My sister, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, looked crushed. The next day, Ben doubled down. He made more snide comments to Lily, this time about her clothing. He called her clothes boring and cheap and said, "Maybe if you dressed better, you wouldn't look like such a loser." This was it. I told my parents that I was done. I told them I wouldn't tolerate their favoritism anymore. I couldn't live in a house where my sister was being constantly belittled, and my parents were too blind to see it. I said I was thinking about moving out if things didn't change, and my parents finally got upset. But instead of focusing on what was going on with Ben, they lashed out at me. My dad told me I was too emotional and that I didn't understand the family dynamic. My mom said that I was being unfair to Ben and that he's going through a rough time and needs support. I felt betrayed. I tried to reason with them, but nothing changed. They sided with Ben, claiming that I was exaggerating everything and making it a bigger deal than it was. I don't know what to do anymore. Ben is still living here, and things are just as bad as before. My relationship with my parents is strained, and Lily is withdrawing into herself more and more. I don't know if I can continue living in a house where my sister is being mistreated, and my parents choose to ignore it. So I'm asking, did I do the right thing by standing up for my sister? Was I wrong to expect my parents to support her instead of Ben? How do I repair this rift with my family, if it's even possible? I don't want to lose my relationship with my parents, but I can't keep letting this slide.